Sorry, I'm just going to check my phone on this. Today's topic today is Insights Beyond Russia. Jazakallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله اللهم علمنا ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما آمين يا رب العالمين. أما بعد, I wanted to start with perhaps a little bit of what I would call a context for the thoughts that I want to share for this reflection. And relate them to the title of looking at things that are beyond the assignments that get given to us. With age, I have gained the perspective that sometimes makes me reflect or think of some perspectives that I think are worth sharing, and tonight could be one of them. The way I think about the month of Ramadan is I think about it as the same way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in the universe the heavens and the earth and all of the celestial bodies that go around another body for a period of time when they complete their orbit and they come back to the same point where they started. I see ourselves as human beings in the life that we live every day, where we get pulled on the demands that exist on us in every possible direction, that sometimes the rubber band gets stretched too thin and we get pulled around in every possible direction. And quite frankly, sometimes life itself, with all of its forces, hurls us very, very far away from home, our spiritual home, and we come all the way around until we make a connection again and arrive to the starting point. But now at the starting point, we are a little perplexed, very tired, confused about the entire trip, and it's hard for us to make sense of our lives and to find ourselves again. And if you wish, the yearly pillars of Islam, like Ramadan and the Hajj, are these anchor points that allow us to find our way back home when we go wherever life throws us, and then we come back to a point where we feel that we need to be ourselves, but maybe a better version of ourselves. So I think it would be a little bit of what I would call an understatement to say that when we experience the world around us today, we are experiencing it with these fancy terms that sometimes the scholars call polycrisis or metacrisis. The definition of a polycrisis or a metacrisis, it means it's an accumulation of crises one after the other that really tear us apart as human beings, where we end up with the separation of our minds and our souls and our bodies that all ended up throwing cast to the winds, and it becomes quite an exercise of collect ourselves together so we can live a life of harmony and a life of tranquility. So when we reach a pitch level of a meta-crisis, we are talking about having challenges that are economic, political, spiritual, societal, psychological, and I think it's fairly clear and fairly standard for everyone to just be a good observer of the life around us, that is indeed the case today. We are in the midst of challenges that are quite extraordinary around us. And so people deal with these challenges with all kinds of permutations, solutions, prescriptions that they grab on by borrowing from whatever. Some people escape in literature. Other people escape in hard drugs. Other people escape by shutting the world down, and they try to go back, get a farm in some place so they don't have to interact with other human beings, so they feel that their world is under control. And all kinds of prescriptions are thrown left and right, but they are not informed by the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored or has at least provided this creation to follow the path on how you find your way out when you are challenged in many different ways. So the khatira that I want to share with you tonight, inshallah ta'ala, and spend the balance of the remaining 20 minutes on, is to talk about one of these prescriptions as being the siyam, this exercise of the pillar of Islam that allows us to come to the month of Ramadan to engage in this activity that's called fasting. But the way I'm going to do it is maybe slightly different from other things that you have heard before, because I would like this exercise tonight for every one of us to reflect on maybe a dimension of siyam that is not very popular or we don't hear about at every corner. So to introduce that, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. In the sequence of revelation in the Quran, not in the sequence of Tadween al-Quran. Obviously, in the sequence of Tadween al-Quran, Al-Fatiha is number 1, Al-Baqarah is number 2, and you have to go all the way out to number 96 to find the surah named Surah Al-Alaq, which is put into the order of the 96th surah of the Quran. At the time of the revelation, when the Quran was revealed, that 96th surah is the first one that was revealed. Because Jibreel comes to the Prophet ﷺ in the cave and he tells him, Iqra. And the Prophet ﷺ says, I don't know what to recite. And he insists a few times, and then he instructs him on what to do. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. These very, very few words. Does anybody remember what is the second surah that was revealed in the Quran when the revelation was coming down?
Mujassir.
I'm sorry?
Mujassir.
Very good guess. It's not that one. The majority of the scholars agree on another one. If one of the kids gets the answer right, they will get a prize tonight. Does anybody remember? Most of the scholars go to Surah Al-Qalam. So they did the second one that was revealed is Surah Al-Qalam. And obviously, Surah Al-Baqarah, what's the number of Surah Al-Baqarah? In the sequence of the Quran, it was revealed as number what? 87. So the second surah of the Quran was revealed as the 87th surah because we had to arrive to Medina for that surah to start to come out. In these three surahs, each one of the opening verses is a miracle. The first one in Surah Al-Alaq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establishes something that if you get on that bandwagon, you are on the right bus. If you move that bus, you lose yourself. And what are these two things? That the first one is whatever you do it bismi rabbika, because if you don't do that in the name of Allah, right away you deviated from the program. And then the first attribute of Allah that the surah talks about, alladhi khalaq, the one who has, and this is an important term, it doesn't translate in English, who has made creation and gave it its existence, so it becomes manifest so you can see it. He didn't create something and kept it hidden. He made it manifest, so it's a creation that became manifest. Then Al-Qalam is the bridge that takes us from Al-Qira'ah, Iqra, to the opening of Surah Al-Baqarah that says Alif Lam Mim. What comes after that? ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. This is the book in which there is no doubt whatsoever. So we end up with a nation that is born out of a word, that is given a pen, and that is entrusted with the book in order to live your life according to a book. I think that that's pretty profound, and I'll tell you why. You turn anywhere in the Muslim world, and if there is a small controversy in ibadah, on al-masah al-khaf, for example, if you are trying to do wudu, and you have to wear socks on which you can wipe yourself, somebody will write 10 volumes about the type of textile of that particular sock. Should it be made out of leather, or maybe a kind of thing that doesn't seep water through, or maybe a textile that is so dense, and whatever. And they will write 10 books about that. You come to al-qabd fi salat, and somebody will write 10 books about should you put your hands here, or should you put your hands here, or should you put your hands here? Should you put them on the navel, 2 inches below, 2 inches above? And we get into these discussions. And yet the 3 points I raised now, 3 very simple points I raised now, that gave rise to this ummah, there is no book about them. There is no book about what I said. Why do you think that is? That's the purpose of the khatira tonight. Is because one of the forms of ibadah that is required for all Muslims is called the tadabbur, is to reflect very carefully on the things that have been given to us as the gift of applying our reflection to the ibadah. So the ibadah, the worship, doesn't become following traffic rules, but the ibadah becomes an exercise that allows us to free ourselves from misguidance, free ourselves from ignorance, and bring ourselves into enlightenment so we can become worthy of adoring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is an amazing little wisdom that Abdullah ibn Umar shared. One day he said, سبق الإيمان قلوبنا. The first time that we have acquired something when we knew that the Prophet ﷺ has come after the Bi'tah is that the Iman, the belief, has entered our hearts as the prerequisite for accepting the message of the Prophet ﷺ. ثم نزل القرآن. After that, the Quran started coming. What was its purpose? فزادنا إيمانا. So the Quran then added to our level of faith when it arrived to the environment in which it has taken root and place. This is something that you should all reflect very, very, very seriously on. I'm sure that all of you know a very popular Sahabi whose name is Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, and he had something that the scholars have contested, but it's technical, we won't get into it in much detail or whatnot. In telling his own story, he described himself as the 5th person who has entered Islam. And the scholars who have contested that said it's the 5th person who knew about the people who entered before him. But there are many people who had accepted Islam Syrian in private that he doesn't know about. So maybe his count is a little wrong. But it doesn't matter. 5th, 7th, 8th or whatnot, it doesn't matter. Does anybody remember when Abu Dharr al-Ghifari left the Prophet ﷺ? Almost as soon as he met him. So he arrives in the famous story where he enters Mecca and he's trying to find what's the ruckus about this new person that came into the community that people are talking about, who's called the Prophet. And then he comes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, I heard about you and I heard that you came with a new religion and whatnot, so I want to take this religion from you. So the Prophet ﷺ endows him with the religion of Islam. So he accepts it, and then the Prophet ﷺ gives him the following advice. You might consider keeping this very private because you are in an extremely hostile environment. And Abu Dharr al-Ghifari says, that's not the nature of my tribe. If we know the truth, we speak it. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to say what I just did. So he goes out. They set up a little bait for him. In today's language, with what the law enforcement does to the Muslim community is called entrapment. So they send a little guy that they plant into the community, and then he goes and basically gets him to confess his faith. And as soon as Abu Dharr says that I have become Muslim, he calls the rest of the tribe of Quraysh, and they pummel him down until he was bleeding from his head to his toes. And after that, the Prophet ﷺ advises him to leave. He leaves the Prophet ﷺ for a period of about 17 years. He came back to Medina after the Prophet ﷺ has opened Medina. You know what has always struck me about this story? When he came back to Medina, he brought back the entire tribe of Ghifar as converted Muslims. The entire tribe came with him to follow him to the Prophet ﷺ. And here is what has always intrigued me about this story. Let's see. He meets the Prophet ﷺ on one occasion. He gets beat up almost to his death. He leaves immediately after, and he goes to spread Islam for 17 years, not being with the Prophet ﷺ. What did he teach people? was he teaching them? What Islam? There was no Quran, there was no book, there was no Bukhari, there was no... What was he teaching them? That's a very serious question. What was he teaching them? He was teaching them to do something that I advise us all to do. It's very simple, very easy, but incredibly disruptive and hard. Go back to your fitrah and start from the gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you when you were born as a Muslim. There is enough treasure in that. There is enough treasure in that to ponder this religion and to have this understanding, to ensure that nobody gets distracted with the words moving. I'm going to stop for a few seconds because it's like a massive show here and not everybody's going to have their eyes there. So I'll give you the time to enjoy the moving of the wall until I come back to my lecture. Oh, we're good? Alhamdulillah. Barakallah fikum. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. Way more exciting, right? I mean, that's just, I don't even compare to this thing there. Okay. So inshallah ta'ala, then we continue with this idea of al-fitrah that we need to come back to so we can endow it with the faculty to ponder, which is a tadabbur. So that's the point I'm trying to come back to. So that's the point I'm making. You can wake up that faculty in a way that is actually not very demanding for you. In other words, it's a matter of being awakened to its reality. Once you become awakened to its reality, then it will spring to action. It's like riding a bicycle. When you have all of these good reflexes in front of you, and simply the tribulations of life come and cloud your way, and if you are able to cut through those tribulations of life, you can recover that memory and very quickly get back into it. And the way that the Prophet ﷺ has described this with somebody else, which is pretty amazing for the people who have the predisposition for reconnecting to their fitrah, to their innate nature, was this idea that he described about Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, if my memory is not correct. The Prophet ﷺ gave this compliment, which is absolutely like mind-blowing on how much he valued Sayyidina Abu Bakr in the way that he describes him. He said, ما عرضت هذا الأمر على رجل إلا وكانت له فيه حاجة. Whenever I have taken to give da'wah of Islam to any man or woman, except that they had something that they pushed back on. What does this mean? Where is it coming from? How do you understand this? So everybody had an opinion. And then he said the amazing following thing. إلا أبو بكر عرضته عليه فقبله. Except Abu Bakr. I just came to him and I said, there is this new religion that's called Islam. Would you want to become part of it? And he said, absolutely, yes. Why? It's because he had this predisposition. In other words, the connection, the travel between his innate nature and what he needed to become did not need a PhD in theology or 3 different degrees from different universities that teach Islamic seminaries. He didn't need to memorize completely all of the canonical books of Hadith and the Quran to be competent in that. Their nature was prepared and could be enlightened in order to come and spring into action and to become a recipient of this understanding of this particular religion. And that's my point that I want to insist on today, that I'm trying to drive home so we can inshallah go beyond what I said are the routines that we do in Ramadan. So, do I believe that the prescription that many of us try to follow on a daily basis, that it's important to finish one juz of the Quran in our own private reading and then come back here and follow another juz behind the Imam? Absolutely. Is it important to have a lot of nafil? Absolutely. Is it important to be focused on many things that people do during the month of Ramadan by probably being more charitable than other times? Absolutely. So what I am talking about is not a substitution for these elements that are fundamental to the month of Ramadan. What I am recommending is that we bring back also and remember this ibadah that's called the tadabbur, the pondering of some miraculous things that are truly awesome. Why? Is because the condition of fasting purifies us and makes our lens sharper so we can focus on these elements much better. I'll tell you the exercise that I personally do every single day. I make a point every single day for whatever my word is that I have to go through, that one of the pledges that I make is I cannot exit something that I read in that daily word if there is something in it that I don't understand. Now, it's a little bit hard work. So I'm constantly accompanied by some lexicon and some dictionary and some other books that are open in order to navigate back and forth. But at least there is a sense in coming back to each one of those elements, that when you look at them and you reflect on them, that the argument about making the most of the month of Ramadan doesn't become an argument of accumulation of quantitative points that we tally at the end of the day. It becomes an argument of hitting qualitative arguments that become very critical to our understanding. And let me say now, why do I feel that it is important? Because I think that one of the things that's happening to us, because of our heritage and because of the things that we have to learn about our religion, is that our sense of understanding, the burden of understanding our religion now, is starting to hurt us. Because in the absence of that understanding, we end up with the situation of the blind leading the blind. And this idea of the blind leading the blind, it can take us all to a very bad place. So I want to demystify a number of things that a lot of people who want to hold the monopoly of knowledge push back on the Muslim community to try to disempower us from our ability to have access to this beautiful deen. Is it true that the Prophet ﷺ, that there is a hadith in which he said that whoever makes a fatwa on this deen without knowledge, فَلْيَتَبَوَّأْ مَقْعَدَهُ مِنَ النَّارِ? So don't you ever speak about something with regard to this religion that you don't know about, because if you say so, then you are guaranteed your seat in fire and all that? Absolutely. Is that what I'm talking about? Absolutely not. Here is my argument. The Quran in its current condition, in the way it's written, when you study it in the month of Ramadan, a 5-year-old will understand it, and the most knowledgeable person on the planet in deen, Allama, will understand it, and a non-Muslim who has studied Islamic sciences or has developed in some way will also understand it, and will have questions and will have challenges about it to bring it to our attention. Because the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this extraordinary gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, has been made by Him, the Creator, so it becomes accessible to each and every one of us. Where people get confused with the advice of what we are supposed and not supposed to do with it, is the responsibilities that we take from that Quran for the mandate that we give ourselves. Am I going to stand here and in all good faith say to a Muslim who has not developed the skills in the knowledge of the Islamic sciences to start standing up in front of people to give them fatwas about their deen? Absolutely not. That would be criminal to expect something like this. That is absolutely criminal. But am I going to bar the access of people who want to have access to their scripture because they can understand it in ways that other people cannot understand it, because it could be a very personal experience that I have with the book? I absolutely advocate that that's true. You can have somebody who might have, I have always loved this ayah, which has always been very, very intriguing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah gives this example, a similitude. ضرب الله مثلا بعوضة فما فوقها. So all of these people that are waiting for an act of revelation from God during the revelation of the Quran that should be almost as equivalent to Musa in parting the seas or to Isa in raising someone from the dead. And Allah tells them, I have an example to give you. I'm going to talk about the mosquito. You can imagine that this didn't go very well. فأما الذين كفروا, so immediately the ones who don't believe, قالوا ماذا أراد الله بهذا مثلا? What is going on here? What example is he giving us about? Not good enough. I'll tell you, each one of us here, sitting in this room here, we absolutely have no clue of what this verse means. Why? It's because you need an etymologist. Now, go open up a serious book of people who have done studies on mosquitoes. And whatever you think you have in your brain, you literally will start experiencing smoke coming out on the example that Allah has given in the Quran. First of all, this creature happens to have, for those of you who specialize in the fields, if I'm going to make mistakes, correct me right away because I don't want to impart wrong knowledge. I think the number is something like 1,500 vision sensors, this tiny creature. They can see in all of the spectra. They can see in the visible and they can see in the infrared, so they can manipulate the environment at night time. They have a sensor to smell your sweat from 60 feet to decide on it what is your blood type. Are you still with me? Yes. I was sure by now that people will start leaving, right? Because this is pretty serious stuff. They happen to have a system to anesthetize you locally when they inject inside you to be able to decide at which level they're going to do that. In picking up your blood, they mix it with an anticoagulant to ensure that its viscosity doesn't bother them as it comes into them. And I can go on for another half an hour on this thing. And then in the Quran, I have always been intrigued by this little tiny plus in the verse that I never understood. فَمَا فَوْقَهَا. So what is on top of this mosquito? It has a number of microorganisms that are parasites that live at the top of their cranial part, that they too have a particular function. Are you kidding me? Do you think that if you're going to be somebody who is an expert in nahu and in shi'r in Arabic language, you are going to explain and understand this ayah? That would be laughable. And that's the idea, that's the point that I am making, that it is completely accessible to everyone. So now that my time is out, and that's my final wasiyah, inshallah ta'ala, to give this gift, inshallah, for people to carry on. So try to see if you can implement the following rule. Whatever amount you have prescribed for you and decided for you to read on a daily basis on the Quran, use a rule of one. Pause on one verse or one word. One verse and one word. And say, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to give this some very serious pondering, some serious reflection on this particular one. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, will provide you with al-fath. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم العصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين جزاكم الله خير والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.